A nation's border is not simply the edge of its territory. It is a revolving door that can imprison 1,000 stories or set them free at the same time. In 1951, a 23-year-old woman named Lee Young-sun arrived in America. She would be known here as Blue, Mrs. Blue Morgan. At the welcome gathering, the in-laws smiled for the camera, a band played, and for a moment it looked like the whole country was celebrating her arrival. The next morning, the newspaper's headlines read, "Groom's mom, dad hailed Korean bride." But the cameras only captured the surface. What brought Mrs. Blue to the country was not the promise of belonging, nor was it the sign that the United States would change. It was Cold War politics that had brought her here. At the core, this documentary asks a simple question. When policy opens the door to immigration, who builds the home on the other side? The history of the Korean military brides proves the answer was never the government. It was always the people themselves. Part 1. Revolution. For decades, United States immigration law was built on a simple premise. Asians did not belong. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 and later the National Origins Act of 1924 made that premise official, rendering Asians permanently ineligible for citizenship. The Second World War began chipping at that wall, but not for the right reasons. The United States sent more than 1.5 million servicemen to the Korean Peninsula, and thousands of American soldiers fell in love with Korean women. But when they tried to bring their wives home, they found that the law had no place for them. One of those soldiers was Frank Krim-chin. During his time in the Korean War, he fell in love with a Korean woman named Lee Ok-sun.
I am seeing about it now. It will mean everything to me if I can get it and come to Korea and marry Lee so she can come to the United States with me.
Reading these letters and seeing him writing to congressmen and trying to, understand the laws and what was preventing him, that was just so uncharacteristic of my dad.
Frank's letters went unanswered for 10 months, and he was not alone. The 1945 War Brides Act had been written for European wives, and only after soldiers like him pushed back did Congress relent, amending it in 1947 to admit Asian brides as well. Even then, citizenship was still withheld until the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952. But none of it was charity. To lead the free world, the United States needed to shed the label of a racially discriminatory nation. Each reform served the country's interests, not the women's. And when the 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act abolished the national origin quotas at last, this revolution still handed these women nothing more than just an entry permit. It said nothing about the ground that they would stand on once they had arrived. The law had opened the door, but it provided nothing else. Part 2. Reaction. The social reaction that awaited these women was severe. Korean military brides were stigmatized by both the country that they had left and the country that they had entered. In fact, historian Chi Yeon-yu found that they left familiar hardships in Korea for hardships they never imagined they would find in America, including poverty, sexism, racism, divorce, and intense loneliness. On military bases across America, bride schools taught Korean women to set down their chopsticks and pick up a fork, to iron a shirt, cook a roast, and to be a real American.
그런데 이분들은 거기에 끼지도 못해요. 그러니까 이분들은 진짜 경계에 서 있어야 됐어요. 그러니까 이분들은 미국 사회에서도 도움을 못 받고 한국 사회에서도 도움을 못 받고 합법적으로 미국은 들어왔는데 미국이 이 사람들을 해줄 수 있는 법령이 없었어요.
Underneath that education was a racial hierarchy. The assumption was that an Asian wife needed to be civilized, but the very isolation these women experienced became the most powerful force pushing them to find one another. It did not stop there either. Their own families branded these women as 양공주, a slur meaning Western princess, a euphemism labeling them as a national disgrace.
영어를 모르니까 남편한테 말하고 뭐라니까 매장에서 섰으면 남자가 때려 두들 패는 거예요. 수도분이라고. 일단은 좋아서 데리고 왔는데 영어도 모르니까 어디 갈지도 못하고 운전도 못하고 바보들만 온 거지 솔직히. 내가 이제 분하잖아. 분하니까 이제 내가 그걸 거두러 다니는 거야. 그런 여자들을 거두어서 우리 집에다가 데려다 놓고 먹이 살리고. 이게 우리가 살아야 되겠다. 응? 우리가 뭉쳐야 산다는 것만 생각한 거지.
언어 소통이 첫째 잘 안 되고 미국 음식 요리를 할 줄 몰라요. 거진다. 그래서 남편한테 뭘 먹이냐고 물으면요. 핫도그하고 폴킨비스 깡통이 뜯어가지고 맨날 주니까 남편이 왜 이것만 많이 주냐 하고 그때부터 시비가 붙기 시작해갔다 그러는 거예요. 뭐 한국 음식 먹으면 되지 이런 주장을 다르다 보니까 폭행을 일으켜서 가정 폭행이 굉장히 많았었어요.
Many women lived in isolation, severed from their language, food, and their sense of self. Military marriages strained across the country in these years, but for women, distance, language, and stigma cut deeper. By community estimate, as many as 9 in 10 of these marriages across the Korean military bride generation since 1945 ended in divorce or separation. In the 1960s, the civil rights movement proved that legal equality without social action was hollow. In the 1970s, the women's movement proved that domestic violence was not a private shame but a public injustice. Likewise, in a kitchen in Tacoma, Korean military brides were arriving at the very same conclusion. Part 3. Reform. Korean military brides did not integrate into American households and disappear. If anything, after the 1965 Immigration Act, they became the bridge that brought entire families across the Pacific. They guided newly arrived family members through housing, employment, and schooling, everything the government did not provide for them. It was no accident that Korean women gathered near Fort Lewis. Military bases attracted brides, brides attracted families, and families formed a community, and from the needs of that community, the Korean Women's Association, or the KWA, was born.
모인 이유는 딱 하나였어요. 그냥 우리 한국말로 시컷 노래 좀 하고 먹고 놀고 어디 가서 한국말을 해도 편안한 그 safe place를 만들려고. 그리고 김치를 먹어도 냄새 날까 걱정 안 하고.
This grassroots movement proved that reform could come from below. Korean women had created an immigrant welfare system designed by the people for the people. In 1979, the KWA was formally incorporated as a nonprofit dedicated to helping whoever needed help. But the people brought more than just paperwork problems. The phone began to ring at 2 in the morning, and on the other end, women were being beaten by their husbands. The founders began hiding neighbors in their own homes, and this became the deepest root of the KWA's legacy, its domestic violence shelter.
우리의 기본 시작으로 된 TV 쉘터. 그거는 우리가 굉장히 프라우드한 게 어느 정도냐면 얼마 전에 우리 한 이사님이 미국 뱅크 오브 아메리카 은행을 갔어요. 근데 거기 텔러 한 분이 뛰어나오면서 I love KWA 그러더래요. 그래서 보니까 우리 이사님이 여기 배지를 갖고 계셨거든요. 그래서 어떻게 우리를 아냐 그랬더니 자기가 남편한테 매 맞고 이럴 때 우리가 데려다가 DV 쉘터에다가 있게 해주고 우리 DV 쉘터에 있다가 사람들한테 트랜지션 홈으로 1년까지를 우리가 보내드리거든요. 그 안에 기술도 가르치고 해서 이분이 잡을 잡은 거예요. 그래서 지금 내가 이렇게 뱅크에서 일할 수 있게 된 거는 KWA다. 이런 게 사실 가장 큰 미션인 거예요.
죽인다고 막 협박을 하고 그래서 나갈 수가 없었어요, 밖에를. 또 내가 내 삶을 새로 시작할 수 있다는 게 최소한 이혼이 된다는 것만도 너무 감사한 거예요. 제가 코리안이라는 게 정말 자랑스러울 정도로.
Historians often describe the 1965 Immigration Act as a revolution. However, the real change was completed by a circle of women in a worn-out kitchen near Fort Lewis. And the pattern they created was not isolated. In the decades that followed, Vietnamese, Cambodian, and other immigrant communities independently arrived at the same solution, building mutual aid organizations from below when the system offered nothing from above. It was a pattern that repeated immigrant community after immigrant community. What began at a kitchen table near Fort Lewis now reaches more than 150,000 people per year across the Northwest. But this scale was never the point of their mission. The real mission was helping whoever needed help. Legislation opened the door, but at the end of the day, it was the people who transformed those possibilities into reality. The legal changes in immigration policy were just the start. Korean military brides had stepped into places that policy had opened and successfully built living communities that were designed to help the people. What they created stands as evidence that in the distance between what the law permits and what society provides, people help people. Laws can open doors, but only people can build homes. And that is something that we should never forget.